All right, welcome to part two of automatic transmission theory operation. We were talking about one-way clutches and sprags, etc. And then I'm going to make just a couple-minute video here. This part two will be real brief and talk about a few more things. The other item that we have to control holding or turning a component is a band. So basically on this band, you have an anchor. So right here, it's anchored to the case of the transmission. There's a band that goes all the way around this drum. And then on the inside of this band there's a friction material. This drum is a steel housing. So the drum spins in the transmission. If I want to hold it, then this band is what holds it. It goes around, and then there's a little kind of divot right here with this pin. And then this is called a servo. So fluid will, remember that line pressure that was built up by the main pump? Goes through the valve body through control valves, and it gets directed to the back of the servo piston. Fill up this cavity, and since fluid can't compress, it pushes this pin up into this band. And since the band's anchored to the case, it gets smaller and it pinches on this drum, causing the drum to stop. So again, it's another control device as we try to operate these planetary gear sets, but we're trying to turn something while we hold something. So this is one of those things that we can use to hold it. Here's our cutaway. So here's that servo. This is released and the band is able to turn, but if I feel that pressure up right here and it moves that piston, that pin goes up, pinches this band, which stops the drum from turning. Another type of automatic transmission you have is a CVT, a constant velocity transmission. So unlike this old school transmission right here with all these planetary gears, see here's some here and these clutches and frictions, and here's your torque converter, a lot of pieces just to hold something, turn something, and get an output, right? So again, we're getting that. The whole purpose is to get that gear ratio. And again, gear ratios are kind of like, you'll see them in formats like 3-to-1, 2-to-1, 3.55, 3.7, 3-to-1, that kind of stuff. And it's always to 1 because it's a gear ratio is basically an input to an output. How many turns do I have to rotate an input to get 1 turn out of my output? So you'll see that format 3-to-1. Meaning you have to turn the input 3 times to get to the 1 output rotation. Like that would be in a 3-to-1, you would have the drive gear, which is what's powering. That would have to turn 3 times to turn the driven gear 1. So if you had like 25 or 75 tooth kind of 2 gears, you had one that was 25, and that would turn 3 times to equal the 175. So that'd be a 3-to-1. Of course, you get a power gain or reduction based on gear ratios. So, but the whole purpose of the transmission is a series of gear ratios, so that the engine the ICE, the internal combustion engine, can operate at its peak efficiency, peak RPM band, and its bandwidth, so that it can tow or go fast, whatever your desired load is. Well, another transmission has this CVT, constant velocity style, which has each pulley is 2 pieces, one consisting of a fixed section and a moving section. That moving section is going to pinch in and out, which as it does, this chain right here either goes down in the groove or goes up top of the groove as these pulleys pinch in and out. So as you can see, this one right here, that these grooves are far apart, so the chain goes down low. When the grooves or the pulleys are close together, that chain rides up high. This is basically your gear ratio. Think like your mountain bike, right? As you shift gears on a bicycle, the chain either goes further away from the center or closer to the center, right? The closer to the center, you're going to be able to spin it faster but have less torque, right? Further out, you have more leverage, more torque, but it's going to spin slower. So CVT doesn't have a series of gears like this old school transmission. It just has these changing pulleys. And of course they have their downfall, which is towing. They're not very good for torque, towing, etc. So real quick before I end this video, I'm going to go back a few slides and kind of give a recap because we went over it quite fast. So let's go back here. Here, let's try this one. Yeah. So kind of what I want to do, overview real quick of a transmission, because you're going to get more of this if you continue in the program. This is just kind of an exposure to the automatic transmission. So again, from beginning to end, real quick, as the engine and the ICE is turning, it's going to turn that crankshaft. That crankshaft is bolted right here to the flex plate. flex plate's bolted to the torque converter. The whole torque converter housing rotates with the engine or the ICE. That turbine right here turns with that housing, and then fluid pushes on the impeller. The impeller turns, which is splined to the input shaft. That goes into the transmission. Now, once in the transmission, it's also turning the fluid pump, which builds up line pressure, which is down here, that pump, and that builds up line pressure through this regulator. So we have this kind of ready to use fluid pressure, which can't compress, remember? So we use this hydraulic actuation, which is known as Pascal's law, to manipulate things through pistons, steels, frictions, and basically the whole purpose as we run this fluid through all these valves and solenoids in the valve body is to redirect the fluid to different clutches, actuators, pistons, bands, to hold something so that something can turn something else. I know it sounds a bit confusing. I'm going to link a video at the bottom of this that shows it in an animation from a company that has a much larger budget and more time than I had to throw this together. But again, basically the premise is we're trying to hold something and that input shaft is turning, and then we're going to redirect that turning force to different clutches, different gear sets to change different gear ratios. And the end result is coming out of the transmission going to be different gear ratio based on what gear or load we want the car to be on. Going uphill, downhill, slow speed, high speed, towing, etc. We're on different gear ratios. So that's kind of the gist. Again, in those one-way clutches, those allow stuff to pivot and turn, and it gives it an anchor to pivot off of, as we talked about those. And I think that just about does it for the automatic transmission. If you have any questions, email me, but please watch another 2 videos on the bottom of this. One will show how a torque converter works in an animation, and the other one is going to show how the automatic achieves different gear ratios through these planetary gear sets. Again, don't get too overwhelmed. The gear sets are just holding something, turning something to get an output. Okay? All right. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.